Welcome to Hiking Adventures with Mark Winfield. Today we have a presentation on the Cape Chignecto Trail presented by Lunenburg County hikers.
Yeah, so just to introduce myself a little bit more, I'm sitting here in Bridgewater tonight. I've been in Bridgewater a little over 20 years, I guess. And Nancy and I have been chums for a while in hiking. I used to work with the District of Lunenburg Rec Department, and Nancy and I would lead hikes together, and we were involved in a few other community events as well. But here, a few years ago, we got chatting with Karen Tews, who's with us tonight here too, and she's the experienced backpacker and multi-day hiker, and we said, oh gee, we'd really like to get into that. I was heading into retirement. Nancy was already retired and had some world travels under her belt, but we asked Karen if she would help us or team up with us to learn more about backpacking and multi-day hiking. So that's what we did, and once we get more into the presentation, we'll tell you what our goal was. So
great introduction, Janice. Thank you. And I'm Nancy Veinot, lived in the New Germany area all of my life. I live in Wenzel Lake. Yes, Janice and I have spent a lot of time on hikes and talking about doing more hiking locally. I belong to two other hiking groups, and I always thought that Lunenburg County should showcase a lot of our area. Enter a friendship with Cindy Graham from Digby through the Fundy Erratics group, and Cindy was added to the planning with Janice and Karen and I for this adventure.
And Nancy and I will kind of try to alternate, but yes, so hiking the Cape Chignecto Trail, this was in May of 2019. I think just after the park opened, so it was early in the season.
Monday, May 20th.
Monday, May 20th. Okay. And this just shows you where the park is located in case you don't know. It is a provincial park. It's about a 3-hour drive from Halifax. All right. And this is a map of the park. And the blue arrow to your lower right there is where we started in. And I will just show you a bit of the route that we took. So that's the park entrance. And we decided to do the trail clockwise. So we went down along the shore where you see a little number 3 there. And then at that number 5 is a juncture there where if you were going to do it counterclockwise, you would turn right, but we turned left. And we went along this, and each of these sections have individual trail names, but we went along to, do you see the second blue arrow pointing downwards at Refugee Cove? That's where we spent our first night. And you're going to see pictures of all of these in a moment. And then we went around the Cape. The actual Cape Chignecto is that lower point. And we went up to, we had lunch at Big Bald Rock Brook. That's hard to say. Big Bald Rock Brook. And then we continued on. And I think it was right along in this section here somewhere that we sent a couple pictures to Karen. Karen ended up not being able to come with us, unfortunately. I think it was due to an injury, but we were able to send her some pictures. And then we spent our second night at Seal Cove. No, we didn't. Carey Brook, sorry. Carey Brook was our second night. And then, so it was a 3-day, 2-night. So after the second night, then we went up through Eatonville and then down that, you see that Eatonville Brook, beautiful area. You travel through the forest and partly old road and right along the brook, some high ridges there too, and come back to that intersection where that little number 5 is. And then we were back out. So that gives you sort of an idea of the park, and that whole route is approximately 44.9 kilometers.
Two things that we were very aware of entering into this 3-day adventure was tide. The tide times were in the area of the world's highest tides. And we know that the tides rise 1 inch for every minute. So we had to be off the beach, and also the elevation. We knew that we're in an area of 200-meter elevation gain, and it's at a 45-degree angle. So we had some very steep cliffs, some of the steepest cliffs in all of Nova Scotia. So
yes, I would say anybody who's going to try this hike needs to have a reasonable level of fitness, because it is very, very challenging. I noticed in one of the park guides that I was looking at tonight is that most of the trail here is classified as difficult or challenging. Yeah, rolling with many steep sections that may continue for long periods. And that's true. There were some long hills up and some long hills down. And you see the elevation along the bottom of this slide. So that shows you, it's just constant up and downs, up and downs. So it's not for the faint of heart. So our goal was to do a section of the Appalachian Trail. And Karen very wisely recommended that we do some shorter hikes first, just to learn, really. That's the experience is the best teacher, of course. This just shows you, we made it. we got to do a section of the Appalachian Trail. All four of us were there for that one, and all four of us did the Liberty Trail as well. So you see here on the picture on the right, going from left to right is Karen and Nancy, and then myself and Cindy Graham. And that's under one of the shelters where we stayed on the Appalachian Trail. So we went from Rangeley to Bethel. We had a great time. So we accomplished our goal.
We left Bridgewater very early in the morning to arrive at the Visitor Information Center to take off for our adventure. And we decided to have a good snack before we took off. The weather was iffy. We were making a final decision. Should we wear rain pants or should we not? And we decided we should not, and the heavens opened up. So we quickly opened up our bags again, dug our rain pants out and changed and set out in very, very damp conditions. And going along the beach for 45 minutes or so, the wind and the rain, great start for a 3-day adventure.
I want to just mention something funny about this slide. You see the green backpack cover there, and there's a little cloth hanging down. This is something that I think each of us had. I don't know if other long distance hikers know about this, but that's what you call a pee rag. Yeah, so this was starting out and it was pretty much a downpour. But I guess the good thing about rainy weather is you don't have the bugs. And I know some others have hiked Cape Chignecto and had a lot of trouble with bugs. So this is the rocky shore, the first little section, the one you have to get there for low tide on, or else you have to go do another loop trail. So this probably saves you a kilometer or so to go along the beach. This picture I got offline. We didn't have that kind of sun when we were going in, but I just wanted to show you, after you do the beach, you go up this long staircase. I think we counted how many steps there were, but I just forget now. It's probably something like the Jacob's Ladder in Victoria Park and Truro. Probably 100 steps there. Yeah, so just up the top of, once we went up the steps and into the woods, there was a lot of beautiful flora. And these are just some of the ones that were, a lot of them were there, yeah. Yeah, Jeff White likes this. Yeah, trout lilies and Dutchman's breeches. See, they're supposed to look like little breeches hung on the clothesline, if you can kind of imagine that upside down.
Certainly we enjoyed looking at all the spring flowers. It gave me a chance to catch my breath after the big climb. And it's the first time I had ever seen the red or purple trilliums.
And this just shows you a bit of what the trail was like. And Nancy's taking a picture of one of those trilliums, I think, or I think the trilliums.
Again, I truly was catching my breath.
We all had to catch our breath after some of these hills. Yeah, this picture, these two slides really show you what it's like going down, because I'm taking this picture of Nancy and Cindy looking down so the trail was higher than they are, go down through the brook and then up the other side. And these packs are probably 20 to 30 pounds. So this, I think, this might even be Cape Chignecto, the very point, but it's definitely along that side. And so here you see the terrain and the cliffs, yeah, and how high up you are, the elevation. And it's just gorgeous. It's a very beautiful coastal route.
You don't get those kind of vistas without the elevation.
Mm. Yep. That's what makes all that hard work worthwhile, is getting these beautiful views.
Certainly, we missed seeing some sea stacks and sea caves because of the weather conditions. We did, miss some opportunities, and an extra day would give us more time for those extras with good weather.
On this slide, we wanted to talk a little bit about our gear and our preparation that we did. We had some meetings and lots of chatting back and forth and talking about what we should take and who was going to take what. And there's always some gear that you share. Cindy and I, we shared a tent, and so we divvied up, somebody carries the poles and somebody carries the tent and that kind of thing. And of course, we were prepared for the wet weather, you can see here. And you take some emergency kind of gear with you. You see, I got a whistle there, and I got my cell phone. I think we had a little first aid kit with us, that kind of stuff. And our packs, yeah, we had pack covers, and we tried to keep the weight of our packs, I think, between 20 to 25 pounds. They might have been a little heavier than that, and I think we did carry some water with us, but we also had some filtration systems with us, which I think Nancy's going to talk about in another slide. And poles, I would say, are essential on this. I know not everybody likes poles, but I was sure glad I had my poles on this trip. And good backpacks, very comfortable backpacks. I had actually borrowed a pack. I didn't have one of my own. Borrowed that one I have there from Karen Two's, and it worked great. It really makes a difference to have a backpack that fits you well. And I loved all the little pockets, and I especially like the hip pocket, so you can get quick access to a snack or something, or your lip stuff or Kleenex or whatever you might need in a hurry. And good boots, of course, but our feet on this got soaked through all the time, but we still had good boots.
One thing that we do is that we take turns leading. So we switch every hour. And day 2 was so funny because the first person out really got a lot of the rain from the bushes and the leaves and the undergrowth. And the second and the third person don't get so much of the dampness. But by the time we all took a turn, we all were very wet.
And the rain, the water seemed to find a way in somewhere, like around your neck. It would get down in from your face, down your neck, and I think even up through your sleeves and up from your boots to your it creeps, it leaches everywhere.
However, in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, no bugs.
Okay, here you can see the park is very natural, of course, and there's some maintenance, but I don't think they can keep ahead of it. I think it's volunteers that do the maintenance there, but this was a big log jam, and I think we did have to crawl across that, or very close to that, and you can see some other debris here that we're climbing up over and getting up a bank, and yeah, and this is one of the streams that, yeah.
The park had only been open a couple of days, and we were reminded that because of all the damage done by Dorian the previous fall, the crews had worked very hard to try and get that trail open, but there was still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, so here's the tent that Cindy brought that she and I stayed in. And yeah, Nancy, you want to tell them what you're doing there? Oh,
I had a water filter, but I only tried it once at home, and I learned a lot about filtering water with the help of friends. We used it each trip, and it really came in handy when we did the Appalachian Trail. But water was not an issue at Cape Chignecto, but the practice was good, and that's what it was all about: training and just learning, how high you have to hold the bag up on a tree, or make sure that you find a place that you can hang the bag so that you can filter the water.
Do I remember correctly, Nancy, that there was some water supplied at different spots along Cape Chignecto Trail?
We did at the one of the cabins, but each cabin had an outhouse and potable water.
So here we stopped for lunch and just got a little drip dried for an hour or so. And I think we probably changed our socks, that kind of thing. And as hikers know, socks are essential. I think those are my boots there trying to dry out on the bench. And then when it was time to go, I decided I would try this little cheap poncho that I had. Well, yeah, so I'm the blue gnome there, or Smurf, whatever I am. But Nancy's poncho, I think, was pretty good quality, but mine was just a cheap one. And it didn't last. I think within a couple hours, it was ripped and torn. And of course, the branches and things grab onto us. Yeah, that's it. The cabins are beautiful. Very nice cabins.
Carey Brook.
Carey Brook, that's it. Yeah, that was Carey Brook cabin. We just had lunch there. Oh yeah, you can sleep in the cabins if you book them in advance. Like we booked a campsite the first night and a cabin for the second night. So we were just visiting this one.
We were only able to get the cabin the day that we arrived at the park. Originally the cabins were all booked and we planned to tent both nights, but with the weather forecast, some people canceled. So when we checked into the visitor information center, we made the change then.
This is something that we like to do when we camp, is play games. And I think we're playing Newfoundland poker here. I don't know if anybody knows Newfoundland poker, but it's a fun game. So
we took every single thing out of our backpacks, as you can imagine, stretched them out, hung them up, stoked the fire all night long. And we had everything completely dry by morning. 3 happy gals.
Yeah.
One pair of Cindy's socks, I think, were thick. And her sweater, I think she learned those couple of things maybe not to bring another time, but everything else was dry. So it was a nice final day.
Yeah, you learn a lot about gear when you use it on extended hikes like this, what's going to be comfortable and what things hold water, what things dry quickly. And these are just some more plants that we saw. That was along the coastal side, kind of along cliffs, and it almost was like a succulent type of plant. Oh, rose root. Thank you, Jeff. And the other one is a fungus. It's probably, is it turkey tail, Jeff? I don't know. It looks a little bit like turkey tail. This just shows you another area that's a little different, not quite as many cliffs and some grassy areas. So another coastal section. So this is still along the main Cape Chignecto Trail. I really like this slide. For a couple of reasons. One is because you can see how hard Nancy's working. She looks like she's on her breath out coming up that hill. And in the background, you see the sort of beachy coastline there with lots of rocks jutting out and so on. Yeah, go Nancy. And way in the background, that island, that it has a French name, Haute, and it has been designated as a natural wildlife area, they call it. A national wildlife area. So it's protected now, which is nice, but that's a really curious island to consider. I did want to mention as well that Karen Toos and I went with a group one time kayaking around this area, and that's a whole nother adventure that people can do. And we camped at a couple of different spots.
One thing that we didn't mention is that the campsites, the cabins and the campsites are 2 to 4 hours apart. So there's some long stretches. So of course, you have to have a plan when you leave the visitor information center. You have to be checked in and you have to have a detailed plan of your trip. There's some long stretches too that you don't have a view of the water.
I think the first afternoon, like we left the visitor information center at noon and we got to Refugee Cove to set up and in time to have lots of light to have our supper and so on. And that I was give or take probably 10 kilometers. But then the next 2 days, I think we did like between 16, 17, like 18 kilometers a day in that kind of terrain. So It was very arduous. But here you see another section of trail where it's a lot of roots. A lot of sections were muddy and wet, which
Oh, yes,
some fresh,
bears.
yeah.
We knew that there are bear sightings. That's the closest we found of a bear. I was just putting my hand close, just I was checking for warmth. I didn't touch it, but I wanted to know how fresh it was because it was fresh enough for me. We did see a few bear tracks near that area of the manure.
Yeah, so this is just showing you one of the bridges, handy Eatonville, and one of the brooks. There's a lot of brooks when you get into the forest section. I think we crossed the brook a couple times too.
You can't avoid having water crossings near the Keyhole Brook.
Yeah.
That brook winds around quite a bit.
Yeah. And the Eatonville, they call it a bunkhouse. It's an even bigger cabin. I think it can sleep, I don't know, 8 to 10 or more people. And I think people can camp around that bunkhouse too if you have the cabin booked. And this slide just emphasizes a point that when you're hiking, you got to take breaks. And especially if you're doing the kind of terrain that's in Cape Chignecto, though, you have to take some breaks once in a while.
This was our last day and we did 21 kilometers.
Yeah, and this is that little intersection that I mentioned earlier. After you go down along the beach and up the tall stairs, excuse me, yeah, and you come to that point, we have to go left or right. And so
we finished in great weather.
yeah. And this is back at the Visitor Information Center in the parking lot. We were happy to be back. We were happy with our trip overall. Anybody else that's done Cape Chignecto want to unmute and comment on it?
I did a section of it. I went with 2 girlfriends in September and we camped out the first night. If you go ahead, you can stay in Christie Field the first night. So you can start bright and early the next morning. And we made it to Refugee Cove. And then unfortunately, through the night, I wasn't feeling well. I was feeling odd. And in the morning I got up and it was just like I was drunk. I'd never had vertigo in my life. I had extreme vertigo. So I actually had to be rescued and taken out because it was too dangerous to hike back out. Well, the cliffs, you guys are aware, obviously, it's definitely not for somebody who can't do that kind of terrain. It's very, very rugged. But yeah, anyways, because my vertigo was so bad, I couldn't carry a backpack and walk. So that's as far as I got.
How about you, Mark? You want to tell us a little bit about your experience?
Well, we did it, Patty and I did it this June, actually the first day the park opened. And we went in the counterclockwise direction. You guys went clockwise. So our first day was through the woods and there was just a ton of blowdowns. There was a ton of mud. It was the first hot day in Nova Scotia. And the bugs were just unbelievable. You couldn't even stop to have a drink or a snack, which of course you need to do, like Nancy says, when you're working hard. So it was, that first day wasn't a lot of fun, but when we got to Eatonville, where we tented that night because all the cabins were closed, and we got to Eatonville in the middle of the afternoon and just set up our tent and took a nap, and we're quite happy in our tent away from the bugs. But once we got by the shore, it was a lot nicer. There was no bugs to speak of. But it's a cool place. It's a really cool place, but it's a tough hike. No questions.
It looks like you had a really good, a good soggy, but it really helps to have hiking mates that just, you're in the spot, you just bear down and you just do it. It brings back such great memories. If anyone, it is arduous, but if you're prepared and trained enough for it, it's pretty accessible for someone who's fit and has desire.
And there's a question about ticks. And I know when Patty and I were there were some ticks, but not many. I don't know what your experience was, Janice and Nancy.
Yeah, I don't remember
None.
any ticks. Yeah, none.
And
Yeah,
none in September at all.
Yeah.
And no bugs. It was beautiful. Perfect time.
Another memory that I have of this hike, and I'm sure some of you have been there, remember, are they called flower pots? There's a couple of really unique features. Like at Refugee Cove, there's some beautiful, huge, I don't know what you call it. I guess they're flower pots, but they're big, like they'd be equivalent to a 3 or 4 story building. Just gorgeous along the shore. And same at Seal Cove has a couple of those kind of big rock features too. And someone asked about training. I was training for another event at the time, so I felt like I was ready to take on these hikes, but I still found it tough. I was still huffing and puffing up and down those hills, but I think you want to do some hills. I think Karen had encouraged us that way as well. Before you do these kind of hikes, you really need to find a hill in your community and do some repetitions, do some training on a hill, or else you're really you're not going to enjoy it very much if you don't have a little bit of a level of fitness.
Yeah, that's what we did too. We actually backpacked all around through my neighborhood, which is in the woods, and did all the hills and lots of practice, lots and lots of practice. So we were ready. It was just a medical reason I had to stop. But
Yeah.
and I think that's another thing to think of too, is the packing. Like you said, we aimed to have our packs less than 25 pounds. It was very hard to do that. We all took our own tents, which was a mistake. If we do it again, we're going to double up. And that's another thing. If people are going in groups, one campsite is not big enough for 3 tents, for instance. Christie Field was, but Refugee Cove was not.
Slept on the shore at Refugee Cove.
Nancy, someone asked about food, and I think you responded there a little bit. I have very little recollection of the food. I remember, I think we did do some joint cooking. Like I remember Cindy had a chili, and we had some
Chili.
dehydrated stuff. And
Oh, hobo dinners
you guys
at
know
Refugee Cove.
Oh, we did. Okay, you guys know what hobo dinners are?
No.
Basically, meat of your choice and vegetables of your choice cut up small in a tinfoil poach, and then you cook it on coals of your fire. Oh yes, and the breakfast. I always do oatmeal stuff for breakfast. Kind of a mix. Yeah, Karen's mentioning that. But I was going to just make another little comment too. YouTube has a lot of fabulous videos about packing and backpacking, and there's so much you can learn on there. Some of them are just short little quick videos, but about how to pack your pack, where to put the weight and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of good information there. And we had, and I think this was a tip that Karen gave us that I never would have thought of, which was packing a lot of stuff in individual plastic bags, especially when you know you're going to get a lot of wet weather. So that really helped keep, and to protect your bedding and what you're going to sleep in, you want that to stay dry at all costs. You want to have at least one dry set of clothes to wear to go to sleep in, and you don't want a wet sleeping bag.
We packed all of that sort of stuff inside our backpack, inside of recycling bags, or people who have dry bags. But then we just used recycling bags and twisted them up really, really good and tucked them in, so it was impossible for anything to get wet.
She's listed some very good points, like, to have flip-flops or Crocs. It's true, when you get back, you don't want to put your hiking boots on, and when you want to go in and out of your tent, but you need something for your feet, and lining your backpack with a garbage bag. Some very good pointers, and we learned a lot from Karen's leadership.
And something a lot of people do now to cut down on weight is, how your tent is in a bag and maybe your sleeping bag's in a bag, and a lot of people get rid of those bags now and just pack the stuff loose in their larger plastic liner in their backpack, that kind of thing, just to save a little weight. I even broke my toothbrush in half, so I just had a little tiny short toothbrush.
What part would you say was the hardest part?
I think I found that first section, but maybe it's just because you're warming up and you're getting used to it. This is something Karen would always say to us: you got to get your trail legs, and that can take a little bit. Like when we did that section of the AT, the first couple of days I found was tough, really tough. But then it got you get stronger or something, or your legs just get more used to it. But I found that first section very, very hilly. Like from the park entrance to the Cape Chignecto point, I found that the hardest. But
And what you mentioned about the hiking poles is a big, big saving factor, because it's very hard on your knees, all the up and downs, and there's some big, big steps. So if you kind of get your poles in place, it kind of helps you get leverage to get up to the next spot too, right?
The final day was definitely the easiest because you don't have the extreme changes in elevation. You have a lot of, things to trip you up, but you don't have the extreme changes in elevation.
On behalf of the group, I thank Janice and Nancy for sharing their adventure. I'm sure they'd be happy to talk about it anytime you walk with them on one of our hikes.
thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Night.
Good night.